Now, let's go back to 1948, the birth of Sri Lanka from British colonialism. Right off the bat, the Sri Lankan majority, the Sinhalese Buddhists, denationalized 1 million Tamils, virtually half of the Tamil population. So they no longer were citizens. They were soon after disfranchised and really crippled any political ability of the Tamils to protect themselves from majoritarian. And this particular law of denationalization was very comparable to the Nuremberg laws passed by Nazi Germany in 1935 that stripped Jews of their German citizenship. And soon after the denationalization and disenfranchisement came 1956, the Sinhala Only Act, which eliminated Tamil as an official language and placed Tamils at an enormous disadvantage in education, jobs, and otherwise. And after that came a periodic series of race riots against the Tamils, similar to what you might remember was called Kristallnacht in Nazi Germany in 1938, the night of the glass, when the Jewish stores were destroyed. It was made illegal for insurance companies to pay. There was never any punishment for any of the culprits who destroyed the Jewish property. And where you find something very parallel between Sri Lanka and Nazi Germany is the fact that in 60 years there has never been a criminal prosecution of a Sinhalese Buddhist for a crime against a Tamil. That is, it's a climate of impunity, the same way that no Nazi was ever prosecuted for crimes against Jews. Then we go back again to demonstrate the political culture of Sri Lanka that very much paralleled the culture of Mein Kampf in Nazi Germany. You all recall that Adolf Hitler had spoke of the final solution in Mein Kampf even before he came to power. And there's a similar dynamic at work in Sri Lanka. There's the Mahavamsa, which you could say is the Mein Kampf of Sri Lanka, coupled with Buddhist monk teachings that Buddha wanted Sri Lanka kept for a ethnically pure Sinhala Buddhist community, and therefore it's a religious duty to exterminate or destroy Tamils, whether they're Hindu or Christian. And it was that mentality that has led to a periodic eruption of race riots organized and participated and encouraged and fomented by the government against Tamils. Perhaps high water mark came in 1983, July 25th, when approximately 4,000 Tamils were killed and slaughtered in the most brutal and gruesome way. Not a single prosecution, no one compensated for any of the massive loss of property or otherwise. And along the way up to 1983, there was a steady erosion of even the exiguous, tenuous legal protections that Tamils might have had against the tyranny of the majority. One, their protection against discrimination because of religion or ethnicity was eliminated, Article 29, by a unilateral amendment of the Constitution by the majority in 1972. Buddhism was elevated above all other religions in the 1972 Constitution. There was an amendment to the Constitution, Amendment 6, that made it illegal even to think about the necessity for a Tamil statehood to secure their basic unalienable human rights, the kind that are enshrined in our own Declaration of Independence. And then there was the Prevention of Terrorism Act of 1979, which was made permanent. It began temporary, whereby it's made a crime to say or do anything that causes communal unrest, even if it's peacefully protesting like Mahatma Gandhi that angers the Sinhalese Buddhists because you're calling attention to their flaws or sins. The Prevention of Terrorism Act is a more draconian law than anything I witnessed when I was working in South Africa during apartheid. It is literally a license to commit crimes against Tamils with impunity. And there's absolute immunity granted to any soldier, police official, or otherwise who acts pursuant to the Prevention of Terrorism Act to detain, to torture, coerce, or to kidnap any Tamil. So we have that long, long history of destroying Tamils. Why is it genocide? Because the Genocide Convention and the U.S. laws defining genocide, most recently the Genocide Accountability Act of 2007, make genocide turn on a motivation to destroy a people because of their, in whole or in part, because of their race, religion, or ethnicity. And it's very obvious from the history and the teachings and the culture of the Sinhalese Buddhists that they despise the Tamils because they're not Buddhist and they're not Sinhalese, race and ethnicity. That's kind of motivation which takes mass murder out of the realm of just crime against humanity into the realm of genocide. And genocide also does not require that you kill or eliminate every single person of the group that you're targeting. Genocide applies if you attempt or succeed to destroy a group in whole and or part. And if we think about more recent genocide prosecutions, for example, the current ongoing prosecution against Radova and Karadzic for the massacre of Muslims at Srebrenica in Bosnia, there are about 7,000 or 8,000 who died then. The children and the women were able to leave. And nevertheless, that was concluded to be a genocide because of the destruction of Muslims in part in that particular area of Bosnia. Now, what are the ways in which the genocide is ongoing at present? It's through disappearances, tens of thousands of people who have disappeared without any explanation as to where they are, and the government basically has imposed blackout zones in the north and the east. They won't permit any forensic experts there. They don't permit any reporters there. They don't permit any human rights observers there. They kicked out peacekeeping troops there. They destroyed the ceasefire agreement so that there's no sunshine, no spotlight that enables there to be a fair evaluation of the scope of the ongoing cruelties and atrocities. If anything, the situation is worsening, especially after 9/11, where very frequent where governments will use counterterrorism as a pretense for committing genocide. When the Sudanese president, Bashir, was subject to an arrest warrant by the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court for genocide, his response was, well, I was just fighting terrorism. But the prosecutor said, no, the killings were open and notorious. Counterterrorism was the pretense, but the intent was genocide. You find that same kind of excuse of fighting terrorism in China, where they are committing genocide against the Uyghurs in the northwest, against Tibetans, and the Chinese say, oh, well, we're just fighting terrorism. And the claim is given some credence in the West, in part because the West has also used 9/11 to curtail what we used to call fundamental human rights like habeas corpus, due process, fair warning, following the rule of law rather than having the president act like a despot. And similarly, the situation in Sri Lanka is such that every time that there's a proof of an atrocity, proof of bombing of civilians, students in mass numbers indiscriminately killed by aerial bombardment that's very imprecise. They don't have smart bombs in Sri Lanka. The refrain is, oh, we're just fighting terrorism. The Tamil Tigers. Everyone is killed in a counterterrorism attack, which is rather lame because the large number of abuses are in places that are completely under the control of the government.